It's turning us into a nation of thieves.
My back.
Today I'm drinking.
The bigger the star, the more stuff they get for free.
Even millionaires like to play this game. You pay for the stadium, he reaps the profits.
You're a freeloader. You're taking money from poor taxpayers to make you, a rich guy, richer. Doesn't bother you?
Not a bit.
Good evening. Do you pull your own weight, or are you a freeloader? What would you do if a cashier gave you too much change? Keep it or give it back? What would you do if thousands of dollars of other people's money dropped at your feet? It's only natural to want something for nothing. But what happens to the rest of us if you take it? We started in Miami Beach. We ran a little freeloader test. We catered a buffet at the pool of the Fontainebleau Hotel under the banner of the SFN Society. We weren't expecting their members since we'd made the group up. SFN stands for Something for Nothing. The buffet was appealing. Lamb chops, shrimp, fruit. People quickly started inspecting the food. How many would freeload? A few? Most? And what would they say when I confronted them? You'll see in a moment, but first, let's consider what freeloading is and what some people think about it.
I sponge because I can. Simple as that.
Freeloading is a career choice, if you will.
These three young men are promoting their book, Sponging, a guide to living off those you love. Much of it's lighthearted advice about things like sponging off parents, but some of it struck me as mean. Rob Moritz shows us how he pulls a list of weddings off the internet and then uses the phone to trick people into telling him the place and the dress code.
Black tie on this one? I wonder if this is the right wedding or not.
Then he bought an $800 suit, kept the tags on and pinned up the loose parts so he could return the suit later. Then he and a date crashed someone's wedding. They spent the evening eating, drinking, and dancing. No one challenged them. The perfect date, they called it.
Cocktails, hors d'oeuvres, a lot of glamour, free.
Later, we told the bride and groom what had happened and got their permission to use these shots. Rob says he's crashed at least a dozen weddings.
Have you ever been stopped?
I have never been stopped. Don't forget, I'm a professional. I wrote the book.
After the wedding, Rob returned the suit, claiming he hadn't worn it.
So give me a gift.
Great, thank you very much.
The store took it back. Then they showed us the free meal trick.
We're gonna do an insect placement.
They go to a restaurant with a cricket in the bag. First they have drinks and half a meal. Then they put the cricket in the food. When they show it to the waitress,
Really kind of disgusting.
the restaurant says they don't have to pay.
Thanks a lot. Excellent work.
Excellent work.
Nice sponge.
Work, huh?
Nice sponge.
Beautiful.
Aren't they cute and successful? MGM optioned movie rights to their book for $250,000.
You people are despicable. Well, actually, what we're doing is what everyone in the world does. If you work on Wall Street and get a piece of everyone's money and you're sitting at your desk and you're making a couple phone calls, is that better or worse than what we're doing? It's better because if the boss willingly pays you, you're not cheating them.
Everyone sponges. And all we're doing is saying, hey, it's funny. It doesn't have to be this terrible thing. We're not being self-righteous about it.
But somebody in the kitchen might get fired because of your cricket trick. Somebody will buy the suit you wore and be living in your sweat. It's not nice what you're doing. It's mean what you're doing.
Well, the first thing clearly would be a shame. The second, I mean, that's value added right there.
It's all about having the finer things in life, just without those pesky 9 to 5 hours. I think people can respect that.
It's those pesky 9 to 5 hours that make a contribution to other people. You just take.
No, those pesky 9 to 5 hours give people ulcers, give them nightmares. People want to get away from that.
Animals are much less likely to freeload. Our relatives, the chimps, for example, because they live in small groups, can't get away with freeloading. Those who try are met with aggression. The spongers get away with freeloading because we live in a more anonymous society. Of course, it's the sponger's behavior itself that helps break the tendrils of community. It makes others more guarded, suspicious. You make life uglier for all of us. You force people to be mistrustful.
Yes, it breeds mistrust. Yes, it's maybe a little bit evil, but it's really an excellent way to live. I gotta tell you.
Economist Walter Williams is one of many people upset about this attitude.
We bought the notion that one person is entitled to live at the expense of another person, or one person is entitled to a privilege that is denied another person. People always want more, and so they'll get more, or many people will get more by any means necessary.
For 2020, I once dropped $1,000 out of the back of a truck and then pretended to be a security guard who'd lost it. Some people gave money back, but once we counted it, we realized 2/3 was gone. And recently, a Brinks truck tipped over on a Florida highway.
Santa Claus came through the ghetto.
Thousands of dollars in coins spilled down this hill into a poor neighborhood. Most of the money disappeared.
I think the whole neighborhood got paid this morning, and they deserve it. You know, these hard-working people, they don't make enough money. God send the truck.
And on our test, a dozen people freeloaded. Some, at least, were embarrassed about it.
Yeah, but this is for the SFN Society.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Put it back?
No, you can keep it. Go ahead, keep it.
But many freeloaders weren't ashamed at all.
Are you embarrassed?
No. Are you?
Listen, you're coming in for 5 shrimp here?
Something new is at work here. My parents told me, never take more than your fair share.
When is it okay to freeload?
Anytime your heart desires, I guess.
You're not a member of this SFN Society, right? But you're taking the food.
I told him who we were.
ABC News. That's right.
When people are not being watched, they take even more.
If it's not nailed down, they'll take.
Hotel executive Lisa Cole says her hotel loses thousands of dollars in towels and ashtrays. And people don't stop at that.
Our paintings, for example, in our hotel rooms now are nailed to the wall.
Nailed to the wall?
Yes, sometimes. Yes, you have to.
Of course, everyone has his own moral code.
Would you take a towel?
I guess so, yeah.
Would you take a clock radio?
No.
People draw their own lines as to what's moral. I righteously use my own stamps if I put something personal in ABC's mail system. But the company's supply room is so tempting. I often take pens and Post-its home. I justify it saying, I might work with these at home. Is this freeloading? Is it stealing? All of us freeloaders have our excuses.
I thought I could pay here, but I didn't see any cashier.
I'd be ashamed to waste those shrimp, so I ate a couple of them.
Teachers are not paid enough. You know that.
That is a natural response. People have to find some justification for stealing.
Need seems to have little to do with it. Photographers could tell you stories about celebrities.
I think that many stars feel like the bigger the star, the more stuff they get for free.
Linda Wells is editor of Allure magazine.
We all let celebrities get away with this. We set up a situation where we're afraid to say no.
The celebrities we're about to mention all deny these things happen, but Wells said when Sharon Stone posed for Allure, Stone was supposed to wear a one-of-a-kind designer dress. But Stone's assistant said, if she wears it, she keeps it.
And I said, she can wear her street clothes. She can wear what she came in. And we did the shoot where she wore whatever she walked in the door because we're not going to give her someone else's dress.
Farrah Fawcett wanted a $200 needlepoint pillow when she posed for this shoot for House and Garden.
And she would not let the shoot continue unless she could keep this pillow.
Sylvester Stallone wanted this expensive Versace sweater and pants. Former First Lady Nancy Reagan brought this Hollywood attitude to the White House. She was given thousands of dollars in gowns, and she kept them. until the public and the IRS complained.
Another case of tremendous entitlement. Celebrities make more money than most of us could ever dream of, and still they're the ones who are getting all the free stuff.
But not the only ones. Even richer people have their hands out too. Like the people who own your favorite teams. Wait till you see what they're getting away with. Wouldn't you like to have your very own stadium without having to pay the $150 million or so that it costs? Well, sorry, you're probably not rich enough to get a gift like that. It's reserved for the multi-millionaires who own athletic teams. You poor people, however, you do get the right to pay for it. Pro sports are richer than ever, and the owners are even richer than the players. Jerry Reinsdorf bought the White Sox for $20 million. Today, he says they're worth more than $100 million. George Steinbrenner's Yankees have made him even more millions. Now, I would think these are people who could pay their own way. Yet who do you think pays for their playgrounds, their sports palaces? You do. Texas taxpayers paid for a stadium to keep the Rangers in Texas. This made George Bush Jr. happy. Bush, who's now governor, owns part of the team. Lobbyists tell voters a stadium will bring jobs, prosperity.
I'm voting yes. It's more than just football.
Yes means 1,300 new jobs.
The stadium will pay for itself, we're told. But it's not true, according to study after study done by independent economists, those not working for mayors or teams. All these studies found that stadiums cost cities far more than they return. Politicians say this will create thousands of jobs.
It's impossible to think.
Economist Mark Rosentraub, author of the book Major League Losers, says taxpayers are being fooled. Cleveland's taxpayers were persuaded to demolish Cleveland's old stadiums and build new ones. The mayor bragged that his new $170 million baseball stadium would create lots of jobs, and so far it's provided almost 2,000. But think about that.
It's in excess of $170,000 for every job. You actually could have done better by just saying to the people who would have been hired, here's $50,000 and try to start a business.
And this idea that a stadium will revitalize a neighborhood is a myth. Look at the scene outside Yankee Stadium. All these stores depend on stadiums for their survival.
Yeah, but take a look at this. The stores are closed today. They're only going to be open 81 days a year when the Yankees play. If we're talking right now, this in the fact is it becomes a dead zone when the Yankees aren't here.
And the newest stadiums often make it worse for neighborhood businesses because team owners build their own stores inside the stadium. Then they keep the money.
You're taking money from lower income people and moderate income people through their taxes and transferring it to really the most economically privileged people in our society.
Like George Steinbrenner. He says unless he gets a new stadium, he'll pull the Yankees out of New York City. Lots of owners make such threats. New York's mayor got the message.
We're going to keep the Yankees and the Mets, and we're going to bring some new teams into the city as well.
Politicians don't want to miss a chance to preside over a victory parade. What about civic pride? I mean, I'm proud that I live in New York where the Yankees, my team, won the World Series.
Then be honest and say, look, we're going to spend $700 million so you feel better about yourself. If you think it's worth it, then do it. If you asked me, would I spend $700 million to feel better, my answer is going to be no.
Why must cities subsidize professional sports? Why doesn't George Steinbrenner use his own money to build a stadium? He wouldn't talk to us about it. In fact, most wealthy owners we called would not. But Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the Chicago Bulls and White Sox, did.
If we had to pay for this stadium, we could not have been able to stay in Chicago. It's a very marginal operation.
You could have raised the money privately.
No, I couldn't have, because you have to pay it back.
You couldn't have paid it back? You couldn't have made enough money here?
No, I could not have made enough money. I didn't realize that this was going to be a debate, or I probably wouldn't have agreed to the interview.
Oh,
but anyway, if you want it to be a debate, we can continue doing it that way.
Let's have a debate. You're a freeloader. You're taking money from poor taxpayers to make you, a rich guy, richer.
You mean if somebody walks up to you and hands you money, you shouldn't take it? The fact is that I was offered this stadium by elected officials.
He was, though the vote was close.
Now I'll be voting no on that legislation. No more new stadiums.
It passed after Governor Thompson, that's him here, leaned on some legislators. A few years later, the park was built, and there was the governor throwing out the first ball. I should point out that Reinsdorf and former Governor Thompson are friends from law school.
Absolutely, he's my friend. Absolutely, he's my friend.
Hey, I need millions of dollars. I'll go to my law school buddy, the governor, and get a handout.
But I didn't give it to the White Sox. I didn't give it to Reinsdorf. I gave it to the people of Illinois. The stadium is owned by the people of Illinois. It's not owned by Reinsdorf.
No, Reinsdorf doesn't own it, but he sure got a great deal on a rental. In fact, unless more than 1 million tickets are sold, he pays no rent. Yet Reinsdorf and his partners get to keep all the profits made from the new skyboxes, restaurants, and shops.
Every owner's dream situation
Is what Sports Illustrated writer Lester Munson calls the deal.
If a light bulb goes out, the state of Illinois replaces the bulb. If something goes wrong in the plumbing of the bathrooms, the state of Illinois pays for the plumbing repair. If attendance goes below a certain level, the state of Illinois will buy tickets.
He's a tenant. Pure and simple.
What kind of rent does he pay?
Rent's based on, largely on team attendance.
How much is he paid?
So, I don't recall the mechanics. They pay rent when attendance reaches a certain level.
How often does that happen?
Well, I don't know. It depends on whether the team's winning it or not, doesn't it?
So far, you haven't made out real well.
Right, but we didn't build it to make money.
Good thing, since the state's been paying much more in maintenance than the taxpayers ever collected in rent. You're taking tax money and giving it to your rich friend.
Oh, yeah, but it was your tax money. It wasn't our tax money. I mean, the whole baseball field is built on the hotel-motel tax. Chicagoans don't pay hotel-motel tax. Guys from New York like you pay hotel-motel taxes. What a great deal.
Most of the stadium money will be repaid by federal taxpayers and Chicago hotel taxes. But again, it's not free money. It could have been used for roads or schools or to support other businesses. I'm sure there's a shoe store on Chicago Avenue which would like a free loan, too. You didn't give it to them.
I can't make an economic argument for loaning money to one shoe store out of 1,000 shoe stores. Citizens would lynch me. They'd say, what are you doing it for him for? Is he your pal?
Well, how about the Chicago Bears? They're threatening now to go. Should the governor give them the same deal?
Absolutely, you should. Government picks winners and losers all the time, don't they?
The winners here are mostly rich people.
6-level dining room and 3-tiered bar area has an expansive view of the playing field.
Fans rich enough to pay extra for the privilege get to dine at their seats.
$18.50 is your Grand Slam total.
Most new stadiums also feature that coveted moneymaker, the luxury suite. This lets corporations that pay up to $200,000 have their own apartment at the game.
When it comes to special places, the Sox suites are quite something.
To make room for all those luxury boxes and plush dining rooms, the fans who buy the cheaper seats now have to sit far back and way up. You have to really want to see the game to be willing to sit up here. Also have to have very good eyes and not be afraid of height. Sort of become a rich people's club now. For $700 extra, you can have roast beef in the club. They sell jackets for $400. It reeks of sort of freeloading by rich people.
Why?
Because they're giving it to rich people.
No, I'm not. I'm giving it to the people of Chicago and the state of Illinois.
That may be, but it means Jerry Reinsdorf gets richer, and taxpayers have 20 years of debt. When we return, the freeloaders most in your face every day.
Help me out about 12 cents. You got 12 cents?
They say they want to work, but do they really?
I just can't work for anybody.
Making excuses after this. We've been talking about handouts. Let's consider the people who seem most in need of a handout. In many cities, you see people asking for help, spare change, tugging at our hearts with hard luck stories.
Could you help the homeless get something to eat today?
Help me out, about 12 cents. You got 12 cents?
Often out of compassion or guilt, we reach into our pockets and fork over change. But does that help these people? And how do we know if they're truly in need or freeloaders? In Denver, Jeff Hubert spends most days doing what he calls working his sign.
That guy should have handed me a 20, little snot.
Few drivers give him work, but many give him money.
Hey, bud, how's it going? Thank you very much.
Would he work for food?
I just can't work for anybody.
Would he flip burgers at Burger King?
I wouldn't do it. It's a monotonous job.
Maybe construction?
I can't do it. My back.
He says he would do janitorial work.
That I would do.
But will he do it 5 days a week?
That I can't do.
Why not?
Well, why should I? Why does a human have to work every day if he don't want to?
All over Denver, we saw people who said they'd work for food. But at a homeless shelter, people told us,
there's no way you're going to starve in this town, starting from morning to evening.
Larry says he and others work what they call the circuit, 21 shelters and soup kitchens.
You got brunches, you got people coming around in buses, take you out, feed you. The one out there in Aurora, what, feeds, showers, give you bus tokens, get back in town.
Nobody starves.
No, you see somebody with a sign that says, we'll work for food, he's scamming you. Because in this town...
I mean, you make it sound like you could develop a weight problem going to these places.
You shouldn't go hungry. See, if you got the IQ above an eggplant, you'll end up with more food than you're going to eat.
At this shelter, people read, drink coffee, play cards. They iron their clothes. 20 feet away, in the shelter, there's an employment office.
Everything in this section right here are the currently available jobs.
John Harpnell patiently waits for people to ask for jobs.
But everywhere I go in America, people are telling me, there are no jobs. You got to have all these skills, a college education.
Not so.
Have you looked for jobs?
I've had medical problems since '94, so.
Everyone had a reason for not working.
But that was a while ago. You could work now.
When I get off my rehab, yeah.
You seem healthy. Why aren't you working?
Well, no, I am working off and on.
Why aren't you working today?
Well, to be honest with you, today I'm drinking.
Within eyeshot of that shelter is this temporary employment agency. The manager, John Martinez, says he has 75 to 100 jobs a day that he can't fill.
You have plenty of work?
Oh, yes. We have to turn work away because nobody wants to work.
He says for these people to learn to work, Denver shelters have to stop giving so much without asking anything in return.
You've got to give them some responsibility, and they're not taking that. They're not taking that responsibility because it's a free handout.
Some choose to live just outside town.
Years ago, some friends named it Clintonville.
They don't have to go to the soup kitchens. The soup comes to them. Church groups bring them food.
We're not hurting for meals. They give us about two boxes of food each week. That's enough to carry us for 3 weeks. It make the guys lazy, you know, it make them not want to get up and work.
You know, I've watched so many people died from misdirected compassion.
Bob Cote used to sleep here. He used to drink a fifth of vodka a day. But one day, Cote decided it was the kindness of the shelters that was keeping him and these other men down.
When you give them what they need, they don't have to sober up to get a job or anything. You better clean it up, or you're going to be back in the dorm, or you can leave.
So Cote convinced area businessmen and private foundations to help him build a shelter that would be different, one that would practice tough love. If you don't work and obey the rules,
I'll kick them out in a flat second.
You feel okay about that?
That's cruel. Positively. They know what the rules are.
These poor people who lived at the bottom of society, now you're going to injure their dignity more with these invasive...
No, I'm going to lift them up. I want to pull them up out of that gutter. I've been out on the streets. I know what to do. Here's a shovel.
What are you going to do? Give me that bottle, get to work.
Cote acknowledges that some street people are truly handicapped or mentally ill, and they should be taken care of. But he doesn't buy the argument that alcoholics are helpless victims of a disease. They and the drug users could give it up, he says, if the shelters didn't coddle them.
It's compassion without any logic behind it whatsoever. And what they wind up doing is killing themselves on the installment plan.
At Cote's shelter, if you don't clean up and fix your own meals, you don't eat. The men start out in dormitories and then move to more private rooms as they take on more responsibility. Constructive envy, Cote calls it. He says it motivates people.
Something for nothing does not work, John. It's responsibility. If you're going to give a man a bed and a meal, then let him rake leaves down in City Park or clean police cars.
It's demeaning.
Demeaning? That's responsibility, and that's what we've lost in this country. We've lost that along with the work ethic. And who's done it is the poverty industry. They've made these people dependent, and they keep them there. They're competing to feed the homeless.
Cote starts his men working in the shelter's car wash. Dave Davis was on the shelter circuit for 12 years until he found Cote.
I could run just about any scam, you know, that I could think of on these people, these social workers and counselors, and they're pretty easy to con, you know what I mean?
Davis says it was only after Cote began demanding that he stop drinking and hold down a job that he was able to clean up his life. Many people find Cote's shelter too tough.
2/3 of the people quit your program.
Well, they can walk right out this door and go right down the street and get in a shelter. And they don't have to work, see? And they don't have to go by these rules. They don't have to make their bunks. You couldn't drag some of these people off the corner with the "Will Work for Food" sign with a wrecker. They ain't gonna work.
They're pretty convincing when you talk to them.
Well, they're experts. They should get an Academy Award.
Hello.
I was skeptical. Won't some of these people who say they'll work for food really work if you make them a good offer? We found a yard that needed mowing, and I set out to offer people $6 an hour plus a hot meal to mow a lawn.
You really need to work? You need food?
Yes.
And I have lawn work.
Do you? Do you have some right now?
I also gave them round-trip bus tokens. I offered these people a job, too.
Are you the guy who had the sign that you'll work for food? I have lawn work if you want it.
Where at?
We made the offer to 12 people who were asking for work. All 12 said they'd come. Only this man did.
You're the only guy who came.
That's because you gave them $1 worth of bus tokens. With $2 worth of bus tokens, you can get a half pint of vodka.
The man did the work, and we paid him $20. Bob Cote offered him a place in his shelter, but the man declined. Cote says he's seen him back on the streets, drinking. When we come back, the man who's been called the biggest freeloader of all. He surprised us by talking to us.
You're a pig feeding at the welfare trough.
Why should I care?
How does he get your money? We'll tell you after this.
Okay, we focused on panhandlers, but America's biggest freeloaders aren't street people or poor people who collect welfare. No, the big freeloaders are rich people, people well connected enough to use the power of government to freeload. These freeloaders don't beg on the street, they're more clever than that. They hire lobbyists and go to where the politicians are.
In January, some 300 corporate jets flew into Washington, D.C. Many came here so executives could attend inaugural weekend parties. Are they here just to have fun? Maybe. But many are here to try to make sure the President and Congress preserve programs that are dear to their hearts. Economist Walter Williams.
Mankind has always wanted something for nothing, and we elect politicians to deliver on that desire that we have.
We elect politicians to give us something for nothing?
Oh, yes. Elect me to office, and I will use the power of my office to take from one American and give you what doesn't belong to you.
Washington is where the serious panhandling happens. These people call it lobbying. Of course, not all of it's asking for money. Much of it's just getting your views heard. Ford Motor Company hosted this party at the prestigious Phillips Gallery. It gave Ford's CEO a chance to hobnob with influential senators. A bigger blowout was this gala given by the Fertilizer Institute and other agricultural businesses. Here's America's Secretary of Agriculture, Dan Glickman. Here's Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa. He had his own table here. As did other politicians, all paid for by lobbyists like Ron Hausman's group, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association.
We're just kind of here tonight to celebrate the inaugural of a president who looks forward to working with agriculture and a Congress who really looks forward to working for agriculture. And,
working for agriculture? What about the idea that they're working for all of us? Watching parties like this, it's easier to understand why Congress passes laws that raise food prices. Not that our representatives vote for such things just because someone invites them to a party or gives money to their campaign. But the cozy relationships built through access like this can make it tougher to cut the programs critics call corporate welfare.
A panhandler is far more moral than many of these corporate welfare queens.
Williams says begging is better than what the lobbyists do, because the panhandler doesn't enlist anyone to force you to give him money. It's your choice.
He's coming up to you and saying, will you help me out? The farmers, when they want subsidies, they're not asking for a voluntary transaction. They go to a congressman and say, could you take his money and give it to us? That's immoral. And matter of fact, I think that a thief is slightly nobler than Congress. That is, a thief will take our money and be on his way. A congressman will take our money and then bore us with the reasons why we should be happy about it.
Think of it as a giant transfer program. Congress takes your money through the income tax, tariffs, and fees and pours it into a feeding trough for the well-connected. Many companies get to take millions or billions out of the trough. There's always justification for it, national security or research or jobs. But what kinds of things do they do with the money? Some use it to sell things overseas because the government has a program that subsidizes some companies' foreign ads. Sunkist needs taxpayer help to sell oranges? Does Disney? It got money to create better fireworks at Disney World. Ford got money to develop car technology. AT&T for phones. Shouldn't these companies do this on their own?
Now, the B-2, America's most thoroughly tested new bomber.
Or consider the stealth bomber. It's now been called too expensive and unnecessary by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Air Force, and the Pentagon. But lobbying by Northrop Grumman keeps the money trough open. But which corporation gets the best deal? Well, think tanks and public interest groups make lists of what they consider the most egregious handouts. They don't always agree, but one company was mentioned more often than any other. The magazine Mother Jones called the chairman of this company America's #1 welfare mooch. They drew a picture of him with the body of a pig. We're talking about multimillionaire Dwayne Andreas, chairman of the Archer Daniels Midland Company.
ADM, supermarket to the world.
ADM's a $13 billion company, yet you may never have heard of it because its name doesn't appear on consumer products. Still, you buy a lot from ADM. Its products are ingredients in all these things. It would be hard to eat without giving money to ADM. Now, much of what they earn because they're just good at what they do. Getting food from farmers, processing it efficiently, and getting it to us. Good for them. But ADM tops the welfare list because of two special deals. First, a government rule that raises the price of sugar by limiting imports of competing foreign sugar. When sugar is expensive, many people choose to buy ADM's corn sweetener instead. ADM's other federal feeding trough is the ethanol tax break. Ethanol's a fuel that ADM and others make from corn. Mixed with gasoline, it becomes gasohol. It's kind of like hamburger helper for gasoline. Maybe at your pump, they don't have to tell you. The main problem with ethanol is that it's expensive. Most of us wouldn't buy it if the government didn't give gas companies that use ethanol a special 54-cent a gallon tax break. That costs the Treasury $500 million a year. But it's wonderful for ADM because they produce about half the ethanol made in America. Why does ethanol get a special deal? Critics say it's because of all the influence that corn farmers and particularly ADM have with politicians. Few companies have given so much money for so long. ADM gives to Republicans and Democrats,
gives and gives. ADM sometimes also flies them around on their corporate jets. All this spending gives Dwayne Andreas astounding access to influential people. When President Clinton flew Air Force One to former President Nixon's funeral, he was joined by cabinet secretaries, senators, and 3 former U.S. presidents. But among the politicians, there was an elusive figure, a man who's never served in any government position. That man. Through his business and family, Andreas has given over $4 million to both parties. He gave to Mondale and Reagan, Dukakis and Bush, Dole and Clinton. He even paid the college tuition for Vice President Hubert Humphrey's son.
You and I and 14,000 others have raised over $9 million through this event alone.
And the money keeps coming. At this Republican fundraiser, Andreas, there he is at the head table, contributed $400,000. He can be very generous. When we contacted Andreas, his assistant even arranged to fly us to ADM headquarters in one of their corporate jets. Now this is the way to travel.
Let me get some plates and some silverware.
This isn't gold, is it?
Gold-plated.
ABC News normally forbids us accepting luxuries like this, but since this was a report on freeloading, they said, as long as we disclose it to you, it's okay. We also reimbursed ADM first-class fare.
Can I get you anything else?
Dwayne Andreas doesn't like to talk about his political contributions, and he rarely does television interviews. But he did agree to talk to us.
Mother Jones pictured you as a pig. You're a pig feeding at the welfare trough.
Why should I care?
Doesn't bother you?
Not a bit.
Is it true?
You'll have to decide.
Okay, let's try. Why should there be government price supports for sugar?
When the price supports went out of existence a few years ago, the price went up to 50 cents a pound. The government put in the sugar program to keep prices down. No journalist ever says that, but then they're not supposed to understand it.
But I looked it up in the paper this morning. It's 10 cents a pound.
You mean the free market price?
The world price, yeah.
Well, if we were buying our sugar there, it would be 50 cents instead of 10. That's the answer to your question.
Wouldn't farmers then start growing more sugar and the price would come down?
That always takes a few years. That's a slow process, but yes, that would happen.
What about ethanol?
No other subsidy in the federal government's box of goodies is so concentrated in the hands of a single company. You.
We get no subsidy of any kind from the government and never have received one.
Well, a 54-cent a gallon tax break is a subsidy.
We don't get that. It goes to the oil companies. They get the 54 cents. We don't.
But nobody would buy ethanol without that.
Maybe.
Ethanol's proponents say it deserves special treatment because it's American-made. It reduces pollution. But an agriculture department study found ethanol may make smog worse.
There is a debate over whether it cleans the air.
Everything's debatable.
Consumers have to pay $1 billion more for corn to subsidize your ethanol.
Well, there are a lot of economic results of everything the government does. I have nothing to do with that. Nothing whatever. The farmers and the government made that arrangement.
And your money has nothing to do with that?
Not a thing in the world.
But you give all this money to politicians.
I'd be a fool to lobby politicians. It isn't that I maybe wouldn't like to, but there'd be absolutely no point in it. I have only one vote.
Andreas and his one vote once came to call on the Nixon White House. The president's secretary, Rosemary Woods, says Andreas brought $100,000.
In an unmarked envelope? In cash?
No. I gave her $10,000 from each of 10 people who were contributing to the Nixon campaign.
So a total of $100,000.
$10,000 from each of 10 people.
In cash?
10 gifts of $10,000 each.
In cash?
Well, at that time, you know, that was 20 years ago, substantially all campaign contributions were in cash.
But why wouldn't they write 10 checks?
Go and ask them. There are 9 of them besides me.
Why didn't you write a check?
Ask them. Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
And the purpose of this money wasn't to influence the president?
Certainly not.
So why give him the money?
Because somebody asked for it.
If I ask you for money, would you give me money?
If it was for a good cause, I probably would.
He does give even more to charities. He gave Mother Teresa more than $1 million. But he seems to get more than a spiritual return when he gives to the politicians who've kept sugar prices so high and protected ethanol. Bob Dole's been on your jet 28 times. He's known as Senator Ethanol. You never talk to him?
I'm not on the plane with him. No, I have no reason to talk with him about that. In fact, Bob's sort of a personal friend, you know, and so we don't talk about politics.
So many of these people are your friends.
Well, look, agriculture is 25% of all the business in the United States. They need to know us.
And why do you give them money?
Because they ask. I don't talk to any of them myself. I don't give any money. But they talk to our people.
But your wife has written checks. Your family has written checks.
Yeah, well, we do occasionally. Is it your recommendation that we should say no?
My assumption is you do it because you're trying to manipulate them and you succeed.
Well, I have no resource whatsoever to manipulate any politician. That's just a dream of journalists.
I told them in Iowa I was for ethanol, and I'm going to be for ethanol.
Just days after the Democrats got a check for $100,000 from you, President Clinton ordered 10% of the country to use ethanol. Coincidence?
Well, of course, you know there was no connection between the two. But,
well, how do I know?
Because I just told you. Fair enough?
Why'd you send the plane for me?
We had a plane coming and we said you could get on it because there was an empty seat.
It occurs to some people that you're bribing people, bribing us reporters,
Really?
bribing politicians
Really?
with money.
Well, I can't do anything about that. Matter of fact, I won't even discuss it with you. It's such an incidental thing that it isn't worth my thinking about.
It's gifts like that, say critics, that keep the government's trough open for ADM. The National Review once called you a modern robber baron.
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
As long as they spell my name right. Who would know me or anything about me if people didn't say things like that? Do you think they're going to say Dwayne Andreas is a lovely, wonderful man? Nobody would print it and nobody would buy their paper.
Are you a lovely, wonderful man?
Well, sometimes.
I'm sure he is. And I should also say that during that interview, Andreas said something that totally surprised us. That and some other good news when we return. Watching all these examples of freeloading is a little depressing. Society works when people pull their own weight, contribute as much or more than they take out. What happens to us when so many people freeload? What does it do to the social contract?
Might you please help us with anything at all?
It makes people less responsible for themselves. It creates a dependent class in our country. And we've created a dependent class among bums. We've created a dependent class among various minority groups. And we're in the process of creating a dependent class for America's corporations. It's turning us into a nation of thieves.
The good news is that so many people resist. When the Brinks truck spilled, some people returned the money.
I came and turned it in because that was the right thing to do.
I knew if I would have kept it, it would have been stealing.
A few years ago, we ran a test at an ice cream store, asking the clerk to give people too much change. Most people, 7 out of 10, gave it back.
Will you give me $10 back?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
At our buffet, people fought temptation. Some seemed to have to fight quite hard, but most didn't take any food. You would never freeload?
No, I wouldn't.
Why not?
Because somebody has to pay for it.
Never freeload.
Never freeload. Nothing's for nothing. Nothing's for nothing.
And perhaps the best news is the attitude of the man most often described as America's biggest corporate freeloader. Government subsidies for agriculture are usually justified by someone saying, food's too important to be left to free competition. If we don't have government controls, people might starve. But Dwayne Andreas surprised us. Do you believe people would starve if we didn't have subsidies?
That's strictly the government's problem. Why are you asking me? I do have nothing to do with government programs. It's not my job.
It may surprise you that most crops get no cash subsidies, yet there are no shortages of them.
You know, the government isn't in the broccoli business or the pea business. And why do we need the government in the corn business?
I really don't think we do. Government's in our way more than it is our help.
Fine with you if they get out?
Oh, of course. Not just fine. Great.
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 Wouldn't that be good news? If he gives up his, I'll give up mine. Will you give up yours? Most people aren't giving it up. Since we first broadcast this report, I should say that Seattle voted to contribute $300 million to build a new stadium for the Seattle Seahawks, a team owned by one of the 10 richest men in the world. Congress voted to maintain the ethanol tax break, at least through the year 2000. In countless different forms, the panhandling continues.